That was a lady that I used to treat, and this is actually quite interesting. It's a lady called Marguerite, who first came to me in the 1980s with secondary breast cancer, which normally limits your life expectancy a bit. And when I first saw her, she got cancer in the spine as secondary from the breast cancer. I would say that now, 25 years on, she is still alive. But she used to have a little dachshund called Barney. And dachshunds, because they've got very long spines, have an inherent weakness that sometimes they can get a slipped disc. Anyhow, one day she brought Barney with her. Barney had slipped a disc, and the disc was pressing on his spinal cord, and his 2 rear legs were paralysed. She'd taken him to her vet, who'd suggested the best option was what he called euthanasia, because he said, when you get this in a dachshund, it doesn't put itself right. She didn't want to lose her dog. She got an appointment with me, so she said, can I bring the dog with me? So she has Barney on her lap, and I swear I never touched that dog. She went out of the room still carrying Barney. The next morning, she and her husband came downstairs, and there was Barney running round and round in circles round them with his tail wagging. And I've actually got a letter, which I put into that book, from the vet, saying that he examined and scanned Barney before and after the healing, and as a vet, he had no explanation for what happened. And I think that's a nice story, because it ties in a bit with the work that I was doing in laboratories. If I work with a person, you can always say that any benefit that they report is due to psychological factors, faith, placebo, or whatever. If it happens to a dog, I don't think you can say that's psychological or faith or placebo. Neither can you say that if it's enzymes or cancer cells in a test tube. I think it's a very good demonstration that there is an energy which can interact and create healing.
And when you say create healing, presumably that the cells are changing. Because if a person recovers from cancer, the cancer cells are gone, and those cells have been transformed. Is that?
I don't know if they've been transformed. But there's a good example of this. There's a person that I worked on who had renal cancer, kidney cancer. They'd had the kidney removed. They'd been through chemotherapy, radiotherapy. They were clear for 6 months. The cancer was then picked up again on a scan as secondary in their lung 6 months later. And in spite of all the medical treatment they were given for that, nothing worked. So they still got a tumour. At that point, they started coming to me. They were off all medical treatment, so we know that it was not from the chemotherapy or the radiotherapy or anything else. They were still being monitored and scanned by the hospital. 6 months later, the tumour was still there on scans, but it hadn't grown. It was just the same size. The hospital then decided to go in surgically and remove the tumour from the lung, which they did successfully. When they sent it away for biopsy, the results came back that the tumour was, to use the medical profession's terminology, necrotic. It had died. So all the cancer cells in that tumour were dead. So although the tumour was still there, it wasn't any threat to the person's body. So maybe over a number of years, I don't know, because I don't know enough about how the body works, maybe the body would have broken that tumour up and it would have vanished. But that's a fairly good example, I think, of what healing can do to a tumour.
Yeah, and I think it's quite well documented that actually cells replace themselves very frequently, a matter of weeks with some parts of the body.
Well, it's always said, isn't it, that we have a new skin every 7 years. You know, we're constantly regenerating.
Yes.
And I do feel very often in the work that I do that all I'm maybe doing is giving some kind of kick-start to the body's own healing mechanism or to the immune system or whatever it may be. That maybe it's not a matter of me zeroing in and zapping cancer cells, that maybe I'm simultaneously boosting the immune system and boosting natural killer cells in the person's body to multiply and to become more effective and to attack cancer. But until we have more research, we won't know the answers to those things.
Yeah. I know there's some healers that say they get burnt out. They're working with people, they're doing good work, they are getting results in certain cases, and then they themselves feel they need to take time off. They need a healing, if you like. Do you protect yourself somehow? Do you... it just reminds me also of Gurdjieff. I'm sure you've heard of Gurdjieff, the Russian mystic. I was reading a biography about him, and he did some healing, and the way he seemed to work was he'd sit with someone who was sick, he would take over their illness, then he'd have to go and lie down for 20 minutes and regenerate. The person would be healed, be a lot better. He'd taken on the illness, but very briefly, and then got rid of it. So there's obviously different ways of working here, and I wonder how it works for you when you're with sick people.
No, I always imagine, I always have done right from the start, that there is an energy flowing through me, down my arms, out of my hands, and away from me. Never ever I'm drawing anything
So
back
it is
towards me again.
Not protection as such, but it's a one-way.
It's a one-way
stream.
away from me and
Yeah.
out through that other person. But I do hear stories about healers and other therapists who have experienced burnout and have had to give it up. But then when you talk to them, you find out that they've got so overloaded they can't say no to people. And I've come across
Yeah.
people who've said to me,
Yeah.
well, I've started work at 8 in the morning and they're still doing it at 10 o'clock at night. Nobody, whatever their profession is going to work those hours without getting burnout of some kind. The only thing that I've found as I'm getting older is that I notice it much more physically. Basically, I suppose I'm sitting in one position, I'm sitting with my hand out and I'm doing that for 20 minutes or so. I get into an altered state of consciousness when I'm healing and I'm absolutely static. And I can sit like that, absolutely still like a statue for 20 minutes or more. When I'm in that state, I don't feel anything at all. It's only at the end of a day when I've seen maybe 10 people that suddenly my muscles start telling me what I've been doing.
Yeah.
So it does get my shoulders and my neck, but I've learnt now to deal with that by taking Fridays off.
Take Fridays off, yeah.
Come and talk to you instead.
And do you sometimes go for a healing yourself with somebody?
I've not been to a healer because I haven't felt the need, and I wouldn't want to take that time away from someone else that needed healing. I use osteopathy a lot because
Right,
that's what I
yeah.
need for the
Yeah.
problem that I've got with them. You know, if I do get problems, it's with my neck, with my shoulder, with my back. And
Yeah.
but you know, there's a very blurred and thin line between all these therapists. I've got a brilliant osteopath, and in my opinion, she's as much of a healer as she's an osteopath. I've got a couple of friends who are consultant oncologists or cancer specialists, and in my opinion, they are as much healers as they are doctors.
Yeah.
The lines get very blurred, and it's just, people like labels on things, and they like to say, well, he's a doctor or he's a healer. And even having put a label on me, because I will only ever refer to myself as a healer, people then want to know what kind of healer I am. You know, are you a faith healer, a psychic healer, a colour healer, a Christian healer, a Reiki healer? The list goes on and on and on. It doesn't matter what kind of healer you are. It's the intent behind it that's important. Whatever label, whatever tool you use is irrelevant. It's your intent to help and to heal that's important, not the label.
Yeah, and this I'm going to ask you also to talk about another book I've got of yours, is Your Guide to Self-Healing.
An old book,
it's out of
20
print
years
now,
old.
yeah.
Yeah.
But I had a quick flick through this last night, and it seems also you're encouraging people to very much take a positive attitude, both psychologically and intelligently in their life, to help a healing process. So there's a lot that people can do for themselves, isn't there?
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, there's a book that's more recent to that called The Healing Journey, which I've been very lucky to have a number of books that have sold well, but that was another best-selling book. And the material in The Healing Journey I have drawn entirely from medical and scientific journals, so it's based on good work that's gone through extensive tests and trialling. And there is enormous evidence to show that, for example, stress can impact our immune system. If your immunity goes down, you become more vulnerable to illness. Anger can affect our immune system and can depress it, allowing illness to take over. There's a huge raft of emotions that affect these things. And I feel in my work that it's not just me coming along and putting my hands on somebody. I can do a certain amount, but if you go back into the lifestyle that maybe was creating that pattern in the first place, whatever I do is going to be short-circuited. It's going to come back again. And I know that I've often got the best results with people that have actually done a lot to change their lifestyle, to get rid of stress, to go through anger management, whatever it may be.